All right, we'll just get started. So I'm Jim Haviland, and I'm here to talk to you about the Resilience Protocol. This is a set of tools and practices that we've established to help when our clients are facing uncertainty in usually in the economic landscape, can be caused other things that can get in the way as well. But I want to walk you through how we end up doing that and to give you a sense of it, and certainly looking for questions so you can use the tools yourself or apply them as you see fit. So, first of all, this is being recorded. It will be available. That QR code there is to the page we've built on our site for the Resilience Protocol. It's a place that you can download the paper on this if you haven't seen that already. It's a good handout, but this deck will be available there as well. All right, so let's begin. So there's 5 steps to the resilience protocol. There's 5 things that we do, and typically we do this in a full day session. That's when we've done it with clients. We begin with some scenario planning. This is really, and I typically give my clients plenty of guidance on how to pull together materials for the scenario planning session. But that's probably where we'll spend quite a bit of time today because it's the one thing that's usually brand new for everybody who's stepping into this, into the protocol. And the revenue analysis, this is also one that's probably not necessarily, unless you're a mature as a business, you maybe have never done this, trying to figure out which things are the most valuable things in your revenue. Then workforce plans, most people have had some sense of this, but we have some guidance, particularly how to make this happen. Process documentation, this is really, once you've gone through all those other things, now you probably have an understanding of your gaps in your process documentation that will keep you safe when you have to make some of those workforce plans and the trigger points. These are the plans you have for when you would execute different parts of the protocol, a shift in your strategy. So just as a bit of an introduction, I'm Jim, like I said, Jim Haviland. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I'm actually a 6th-generation entrepreneur in my family. We weren't necessarily very good at it, but that was really why I wanted to make sure that I figured out how to have a big, healthy approach to entrepreneurship because I've been through it many times. And my number one goal is to help make sure no great idea dies for the wrong reasons. So I've had seen plenty of that. So, and I'm part of Impact Architects. We're a growth advisory. We work traditionally with companies that are looking to grow or exit. So, getting the most out of the business they've built, so that they can exit successfully and significantly. And we've worked with hundreds of clients at this point on these topics. Lots of logos. Let's keep going. So, first of all, before we get into the 5 steps and get drill down on them, I want to talk a little bit about what this ends up looking like. So these tend to be full day sessions where you're going to bring in some homework. So you can't just step in cold and expect to get a lot out of this. What you want to do is do some homework, make sure everyone understands what the uh, agenda is going to look like and what's going to be required of them in each of the steps. So I'll speak to that as we go through it. And you gather your leadership team and your board. So depending on where you are when you grow through your company, you want to have all the people in the room that could make the big important decisions. And that are part of your future, regardless of what happens. So, those people that are your best advisors who can untangle complicated webs, because we're going to try to create scenarios. So we're going to have to be people that are pretty agile with how they think about um, uh, if this is true, then that is true. So you want to have your big brains on board and having done some homework. So the more you can do ahead of time, the more you'll get out of this very high impact day. And you're going to spend a full day. Don't plan on trying to cram this in. So I've done this over 2 half-day sessions just because of the nature of the business trying to stay afloat. But plan to spend a good bunch of time on this. Each of these steps are important, and I wouldn't try to like extend them out over more than 2 half-days. Just from my experience, what you want to do is make sure you've got it all kind of in your head. So you don't want to have to kind of restart your thinking. But it sometimes can be valuable to have an overnight between 2 sessions, so your brain kind of works out some of the more sticky bits. And you want to document your plan. So you're going to come out of this with four potential plans. That is the nature of the scenario planning. And you're going to want to have documentation so everyone knows what to do coming out of those. If you're running a business operating system, this would be much easier because this would be adjustments to your quarterly plan, your 1 year plan, your 3 year plan. That's the kind of thing you'll have in there. Different scorecards you're going to need to create to be able to support those plans. And then you're going to assign work. So coming out of this, everyone that's there is probably going to have some work to do. If you're running an operating system that uses rocks or some kind of a quarterly initiative, there are going to be rocks involved in this, and I'll point out where those things are because there's going to be some things to go do. Yeah, that's the whole point. Almost always. I mean, very few companies I've worked with have done the consistent work of making sure that they can thrive in a down economy, right? So typically, it's like when we see it coming, that's when we're going to spend time on that, and that's okay. Okay, that's like I said, that's pretty common. Um, and then you're going to want to, whatever we come out of this, one thing we come out of it is some trigger points. These are when these things are true, then we will have to make adjustments. So you're going to want to think about how you're going to document those. If you're not in an operating system right now, you might want to think about that because um, typically what will come out of this is something on your weekly scorecard, something on your quarterly measurables and your annual measures, and maybe some monthly stuff as well. So, and typically we handle the monthly stuff in what I teach my clients in inside of the weekly meeting. So at some point you just, one point during the month, you'll go look at the monthly numbers as well. And so that's usually we're not going to go a whole year and have the scenario not need to be adjusted. It's really about something that's going to happen in the next 9 to 12 months. That's typically how we're thinking about it. So let's start with this first one. The first thing is some scenario planning. And if you haven't done this before, it's not an uncommon approach. I didn't invent this, but the notion here is that you're going to pick out the two, usually it's just two because more than that, it gets three-dimensional and it's a little harder to picture and make good plans. But what are the two highest impact things that are likely to happen? And in my experience, most leadership teams are pretty much on board with the top five things that could go wrong. That's typically what we're looking for. Is what are those things that can happen in the near term, 6 to 9 months, that are detrimental to our growth strategy? And if there's just one of them, then typically we don't have to do a lot of extra stuff with that. We just might be watching for something. But if there's more than one, which is typically something that we're facing a lot right now, a lot of my clients are facing this notion of there's a lot of moving pieces right now. Anything more than one feels like a lot. So you pick the two most impactful ones, and then you say, okay, if neither of these two things happen, that's probably, we're probably still back with our original plan, but maybe not. We go through this, we might realize that there's an opportunity for improvement in profit or in how we manage clients or employees. Then if one of them happens, or the other one happens, or if both of them happens, those are the four quadrants here. Of the scenario planning. So like let's first thing we're going to do is decide on what scenarios we are going to drive towards, and you want to agree on those two highest impact factors. And if there's more than that, you maybe need to do this a couple different times to get to it. But more than likely, you can. I've never had a problem getting down to two that are most impactful. So, and you want to be specific as possible because we're going to try doing some calculations against these things. So, not uncommon one that people are dealing with in my circles are tariffs at 15% versus 50% would be an example. And you want to be able to think about how would that impact what we're doing. And I've included that in an example here that I'll show you here in a minute. And it's usually valuable to name these scenarios. So, one of the things we like to say in our practice is important things have names, and these are important possibilities in our future. So we'll name them. And sometimes the people use movie quotes for names or baseball teams, and whatever you want to do. You can find a theme, or you don't have to find a theme. I didn't do anything particularly thematic in my example I'll show you here, but you want to use some code words so that you can talk about them on a regular basis and know what everyone's talking about. So the better you do a job of kind of instilling this as a mental framework for, okay, what if only one of these things happens? What's that called? So we don't use three sentences to get there, we can go, okay, under the blueberry principle, this is what we have to worry about, and take everyone back there. So it's like we teach in so many other ways. Coming up with language, shared language that helps us understand where we are is truly, truly valuable. Um, then we can extrapolate that context. So you want to think a little bit about what are some unintended consequences of these things. That's really where so many of the business errors in our world happen, is in the unintended consequences. We made this decision, but it had these other trigger points down the road. And you want to give yourself a chance to think about that. So sometimes these things can compound. So if if I have a tariff concern for my own products, maybe the people that I'm buying from domestically will also have that problem, and we have to think through that. If they aren't going to have that, that's great. But if they are, then it becomes a double problem, right? So, and we have to think about the tariff impact of our other stuff, our domestically purchased stuff, which is not uncommon. Uh, so that, or what impacts me might also impact my customers, and therefore my customers might have, uh, be less likely to buy as much next year, and so on and so forth. And then consider the strategy and plans for each scenario. So that's what, once we've gone through and we understand our scenarios, like we figure out what the four scenarios are. Nothing happens, this thing happens, that thing happens, or both things happen. Then we really want to go through that imagining scenario for kind of coming up with that, what those scenarios look like. And some people find it valuable to write a little story for each of the four, if that helps people better understand. It really depends on the team you're working with and how they best digest things. But um, that is the goal here, is to give yourself four futures that you want to be able to think about and figure out how those going to impact things, and then go look at your strategies, your current strategies and plans, to make sure that to ask the question, how are they going to be impacted by these things? That's the whole point. So if when we talk about strategy and plans, if you're running on EOS, that's something called the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer. If you're talking about scaling up, that's the one-page strategic plan. But in general, these things are like what we have planned for revenue and profit and things we're going to try to get accomplished this year. Quite often with my clients, we either have 2-year, 3-year, or 5-year plans on top of that. So, how do those things that happen this year cascade into those? Because your 1-year plan is kind of a milestone towards these longer term plans. If the 1-year plan breaks down, then you have to impact those long term plans as well. Um, and whatever strategic maps you have. So there's things like the Jim Collins map, is another one that would have a that you could go back and consider and look at each of the pieces and just kind of interrogate each of the parts of there. Is this still true? What impact would it have on this? And that's what we're really trying to get to, is with these, is like, let's look at under these conditions, how would that change how we think about each of these things? And what do you eliminate is ultimately the first thing you want to get to. Like, what's the thing that we can let go first? So quite often I work with my clients on quarterlies, they have a bunch of quarterly initiatives they're going to try to get to. And if there's quite a few, or if I feel like they're not 100% solid on they're going to be able to have time and energy to implement all of these, I ask the question, which one comes off first? Decide on that now, because it's important to be able to make those determinations, to decide what comes off first. All right. So here's my example that I thought might walk you through. So in this example, I've got scenarios 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I've color coded them, so it's a little bit easier to track. And in this instance, I'm looking at either tariffs 15% or tariffs 50%. That's one of the axes in my scenarios. And the other one is whether customers are going to slow down or not. So, I had a plan for my customers in this instance growing at 20%. I was gonna have a 20% growth model, pretty aggressive, but I like, most of my teams that I'm working with want to be high growth, and if in the in the absence of economic challenges, we can pretty much meet our plans. But if we if no one slows down, if then we're gonna get to 20%. If they do slow down, then we're not gonna see the 20%. That's the two uh, examples here. And in those things, I gave them names. So scenario one, no, tariffs stay where they are right now, 15%, and there's no slowdown. So I call that smooth sailing. If the tariffs don't change, but my customers do slow down because there are other headwinds in the marketplace, or maybe they're having tariff issues that we don't know about, we would say slow but steady. We're going to still be here, but we're just not going to execute our growth plans. Um, Scenario three with the tariffs, unfortunately, this one's going to looks like a pivot because that's going to really damage my net profit. It's going to, so we're going to have to make some big changes here, based on how we're thinking about our model. And then the hunker down, that's if we get both those things. We have customer slowdown and we have tariffs. And you see how this plays out in revenue, COGS, net profit, and headcount. I just picked these four metrics as something to to play out here. So revenue, you can see there it's either 4 million next year or 3.2, right? That's a 20% growth that I was hoping for. Um, and then you can see COGS. You can see some scenarios there based on, is COGS going to be basically what it is now at the 1.5 million? And then if we don't have a change in tariffs, in the slow but steady model, then when our COGS going to be 1.2. I'm still going to have the same infrastructure I have today, so my net profit goes down to 2%. And my head count, I'm only going to get to about 22 people, so I'm probably not going to hire as much. But now I have at least a sense of it. I know kind of what that looks like. Now, if it goes the other direction and I end up with tariffs being high, I might still get to 4 million, but my COGS is going to go up a lot. And not to impact everything I buy, but in this instance, it impacted a number of things on the that are part of cost of goods. So I end up wiping out my net profit. And maybe, in that scenario, maybe I want to make some other adjustments here. Maybe I can't afford that, or I'm not willing to take that kind of hit for the year. And then my headcount doesn't get to be quite as high because, and I'm thinking about okay, how am I going to get this work done? It's still the same amount of work for, the $4 million. I wanted to get to 25 people, but I'm only going to have 24. What does that mean about quality and or time of delivery? Let's think through that. It's like that. Am I still going to be able to deliver enough to make the 4 million, or am I going to have to, maybe I'm paying more overtime at that kind of point. So that's why my net profit goes down. Yeah, those are the kinds of things you have to think through and come up with a reasonably good guess around that stuff. And the hunker down, this is a bad model. This is where I'm actually going to be negative net profit, and have a lot of overworked people, more than likely at 19, because I'm even below where I'd be if under scenario two. So that's just an example of how you might look at it. These aren't necessarily the numbers you need to look at within your thing, but this is just, it's probably whatever you typically are looking at it, that because typically you have some numbers that you look at that represent the most important numbers for your business. So always revenue and profit are always on that list. And then some other things that represent you maintaining your bank line or being able to do your next fundraising round, whatever the most important stuff on here should be on here, because I'm thinking about how each of these scenarios are going to impact that. And this is going to be a little bit of homework beforehand, hopefully. And you're going to have the numbers available to you because you're really going to do some real calculations, at least the easy ones, the back of napkin type in your session. All right. Hopefully that's helpful. So the second part, once we have that, we've got our thoughts in our head about who our folks are, and uh the what the scenarios we're going to go through. Now we want to think about our revenue, and there's a couple things we want to look at. We want to figure out what are the most impactful parts of our revenue. Sometimes not all revenue is created equal, depending on where we're going next, and what if we're worried about cash like we are in the hunker down model, then we might choose different products and customers that we want to maintain, that are most important to stay out of that negative net profit part of our world. Or maybe we say, hey, you know what? The best thing for us to do is just to use this to get rid of some of the customers we don't really want. There's lots of ways of looking at it, but you're going to want to have couple of years of revenue data, but you're going to want to figure out your top revenue products. Like you do that as homework. Like, what are the places where we're making the most money, and come up with a way of thinking about that. It's not going to be perfect information more than likely, unless it's something you've calculated before and are good at this. But you want to have a way of thinking about it. So someone needs to come in with the idea of like, well, these are where we make the most revenue, but they may not be the same ones where we make the most profit. So those are both two good things to do. And then kind of analyze your customers. And because you're going to be looking at customers not only from the standpoint of uh, how much revenue they make for you, and hopefully profit as well, and you're looking at both those, but also which ones are at risk themselves. So under these scenarios, which customers are going to be hardest hit and are like most likely to slow down? That's a way of thinking about them. And you should make some guesses about the allocation of costs. So, thinking through it, best guess, this product requires this kind of labor. This customer, their revenue's high, but they're really a pain. They ask for a lot of extra stuff. So we think about them as a lower profitability, but they're likely to be not going to be affected by it, so maybe we want to keep them. So you just want to make sure you're thinking through all of these different parts of your revenue, your profits, and your customers in a way that helps you get to a better understanding of where your profitability lies and where your revenue lies. And you should identify in each scenario what are the things that are really at risk. You should look at hey, under this scenario, this revenue or this profit is really at risk because this is, hey, we got a product line that doesn't involve a lot of the stuff that got hit by tariffs. Even in hard times, customers are going to need this thing. So those are kinds of things you want to think through and ask the questions. And you should plan what it would look like to maximize profit for each scenario. Just not that you're going to go do that, but like if we get to hunker down, how do we maximize our profit? What would be the products or services or customers that we would not serve to maximize profit? Or what would be the adjustments we make to any of those products or customers to get there? Because you may go ask for that. You may talk to customers and say, hey, we're not going to make it together if we don't make some adjustments, and go ask for those adjustments. Because more than likely, you aren't alone in how you're thinking about how the future is going to look. And that's really what you want to do. You want to understand what you're going to be asking for from customers and suppliers coming out of this, because it's no point in not asking. You should ask for the things you need to continue, because everyone should feel like they want to be successful in this, and they want to survive it. That's the most important thing to do. And so your suppliers and your customers want to survive as well, so that it's without having a disruption of like you going out of business or you stopping to be a customer for your suppliers. All right. Now we've got our scenarios. We understand where the revenue and profit is, where the most the places where we can best hope to find it. Now and how that's going to impact each of those four scenarios. Now we're going to go through and we're going to figure out, more than likely, even bigger than cost of goods sold is our cost of labor. And more than likely, we're going to have to make adjustments under any of these scenarios. We're going to have to, not all the people we have right now are they're going to be the right people, or we're not going to be able to add the people we want like we wanted to, or there's going to be required some cross training. All of these things are distinctly possible throughout all of this. So we will have to agree on. Let's look at our staffing. A, B, and C, each of the folks on the team. And this is something you want to get good at anyway. This is a good model for thinking about, hey, what are the A players in my business? I don't want to lose those folks. I want to double down on making sure I did a good job there, hiring them. They're in a good place. They love what we do. They're great at their job. They're right people, right seat. They're hell yes. So we want to make sure we're investing in them, but we're also want to think about, I want to keep those people regardless of what happens. And they may or may not have the right skills, or they're doing their jobs right now that are going to be most important when we adjust our staffing. So they might be ones you want to cross train. But you want to go through everybody, and when you look at the C's, are there C's you could exit now? I mean, that's one of those things. If you can quickly start giving yourself more runway before things happen, it's a good idea. So going through and tiering your folks, asking the question, are there these people that we should probably let go of now versus waiting because we know that they're not they're not part of any of these future scenarios, so there's no point in keeping them now, right? So it's one of the good outcomes here right away is it's always good to like let's focus on making sure we've got the right people in the right seats. And one of the things we do inside of 90, all my clients are on the software called 90, not 90.io. And you can create org charts for various scenarios in 90. You can, as a team, you can create ones that just you see inside the software. Um, and you can start playing with these things. You want to, do a little work figuring out, okay, if we're only going to support these customers and these products, or we're going to expecting these changes and we have to make these, find ways of um, otherwise getting to profitability, this is the kind of staffing we need that we need. And so you'll lay those out. What are the, who is going to be likely to change what they're doing or have to take on more than one job? How can we can consolidate reporting structures so that we've got a little better responsiveness to changes? And then are there gaps in training skills or expertise in each scenario? So like, hey, in this scenario, if we, in our worst case scenario, when we go down 19 people, are those 19 people, do they represent all of the most important uh, processes that we have in the business, all the expertise we have in the business? If not, we should probably do something about that because maybe if are these the right people, and if we don't want to lose our A's, maybe we got to train them up, or maybe we just know that if everything goes bad, we're going to lose some A's because we got to have some B's in here that have these skill sets that we absolutely need to have to survive in this scenario. Um, and then how many people do we need to be profitable in each scenario? And one of the things we like to talk about, there's a couple numbers here that help. Um, it's good to know your revenue and profit per employee. Now, this is something that's a standard part of the scaling up operating system, but it's a good one. I ask all my clients to kind of understand this because what you really want to know is the Goldilocks zone for revenue and profit per employee. Because if you're making a lot of revenue and profit per employee, you're probably burning some people out. That tends to be the case. Or if you've gotten to a couple of quarters where people are really feeling like they're getting burned out, then okay, that's too many. That's too much money per thing. We have to make some adjustments here. Not all profit's good profit. If you're killing people or you're going to lose good people because they're burned out, then you're not really doing your job as a leader. And then if you have too little revenue or profit per person, you probably are hiring too fast. And figuring out that Goldilocks zone where you've got the right calculations is really helpful. And it's an outcome of this work that you can carry with you regardless of what else is going on, whether or not any of the bad scenarios happen. Um, and then you go back and validate your org chart plans against these. So in this plan, it looks like how many boxes do we have? How many seats do we have? Okay, that seems about right. And that's by the way something you'll be able to use every quarter going forward. You should, if you're making a 1 year plan, at the end of the year, what's our org chart going to look like? How many seats per is that? What's our revenue per seat at that point? And am I in the Goldilocks range? So that's a great outcome of this work is you're going to be much more mature at making plans, especially on people, which is the thing that can either make it great for you or ruin you. Now you've got all that. So we've got a plan for we have four scenarios we're looking for. We've looked at revenue in those things, and we thought about staffing for those revenue plans. Now we have to fill the gaps on process. So that's like typically one of the things that falls apart as we're making these transitions to a different staffing structure, different org chart, is that not everyone knows how to do all the stuff that we want to have happen, and we can plan for that. Because by the way, that's just good management anyways. You should have everybody should understand enough of what's going on in the business and be able to be cross-trained in enough of the things in the business that something bad happens, someone wins the lottery or gets abducted by aliens, and now you still have the ability to execute well the next day. So you want to have some coverage there. That's a way of de-risking your business. And you also want to make sure this is a good chance to make sure you've got good documentation on these things, which is always a good plan. So do you have all the processes that are a part of each scenario documented? So if you're And usually the answer is no. You're not going to have all of them. So you have to figure out what the most important ones are because you can't do everything. You can do anything, but not everything. How many people are trained and ready to execute each of those processes? That's the question. Next question you have to ask. And in another version of this, I do have a grid process for this. Like, you have all those people A, B, and C. How many of them are able to do these important processes? Is there any weak points, any single points of failure on this list, A, B, and C? Understand that. And then what you should be also doing is looking for opportunities for automation. And this was a question I'd ask in this scenario anyway. But now that we've got AI, there usually are some things you could do to go automate some of the more straightforward things that happen in the business. And it may be an outside consultant that helps you do that once or twice. And if you don't have anyone that's particularly good at those kinds of things inside the business, but it we'd like to delegate, to elevate, automate as much as possible, or eliminate are the things that we should just stop doing that we do that will give us some more runway. So anytime going through this, you're going to find things that, oh, now that we've inspected that, now we know we don't need to do that anymore, or that should really just be automated, or that should just be completely eliminated. Why were we ever doing that? All this becomes very valuable in just making you more generally resilient, even if none of these scenarios come to be. But you're going to come out of the day, the planning day or days, with probably some rocks to be assigned. And you're going to be someone have to go out and document each of the processes. Someone's going to have to do some cross training, and then some process automation, either AI or something like. So these are the kinds of rocks I would normally expect to come out of this. Let's just make sure we're covered in these areas. It's a great defensive move regardless, and it can be a great way of getting to better profitability, by the way, by just figuring out what these things that we can actually go do that make us more resilient, but also ends up helping us with profitability in general. All right. And then lastly, the trigger points. And the thing here is, folks, entrepreneurs tend to be optimistic. It's why we're entrepreneurs. We think things are going to be fine. We think we're going to be able to figure it out. So you should, as often as you can, give yourself an answer to the question, when will we know we're wrong? Right. So I'm assuming this is going to happen. When will I know I'm wrong? I think these are the things we're going to, scenarios for the future. When will we know we're wrong? So giving yourself some way of absolutely letting the numbers be your editor and protecting you. When my clients, when we build a weekly scorecard for the leadership team or for any of the teams, one of the things we call it is that early warning system. This is a way to let us know when things aren't going the way they want to go. So on that weekly, that monthly, or that quarterly plan, you should have some numbers that let us know, if they're not there already, that things are going poorly as early as possible. We want to know early as possible. It's if we're going to go to the hunker down model, if we believe that's what's coming, we may or may not know. I mean, the tariff changing 50 to 50, we probably hear about that, but it may, as we've seen, it may change without much warning. But certainly client slowdown, that might be really hard to monitor, and you don't want to wait till the revenue's not coming in. You want to know when, much as early as possible. So one of the things we have to add to our scorecard so we can see that one coming, right? So make sure you've got all the right measurables, and then decide as a team, get alignment. Like, if this starts to happen, then this is what we're going to go do. And there's some risk with all of these. I mean, if you execute on your hunker down plan before you know for sure that hey, there's an announcement that we may get 50% tariffs, and it looks a little bit like things are slowing down. If I executed that, there's some possibility that I needlessly slow down my growth, and or I lose people because I just think that we're not going to make it. These are real concerns. So you want to be careful about that, but you'll be in much better shape to respond to that if you've held on to the cash by not making the mistakes. The most likely scenario is the one you didn't plan for. That's just the way it is, man. So we've given ourselves these black and white, these four black and white scenarios, but more than likely there's gonna be something in the middle, right? Or completely outside of that. I did a lot of this kind of work in 2008, 2009 with clients, and What we hadn't planned for, any of us, were like all the universities, shutting down spending against their because their endowments were all hit so hard um, with Wall Street falling apart. So we hadn't planned for that. So I had a company myself that sold in the universities, and so suddenly all of our contracts were severely cut back or taken to zero. And there was really no way to plan for that. We couldn't. We It was not it's somewhat unprecedented at the scale and scope of that, and that's to me the way it is. You can't necessarily plan for everything, but if you run through these steps, more than likely you're going to be more resilient and be able to better survive whatever does happen. But choose some metrics, two or three, um, and then figure out the right cadence for looking at those metrics. Don't let yourself look at them every day because more than likely you're not going to know every day. But as a team, a team of deciders, let's look at them on a regular basis and hold each other accountable. Someone be the 10th man and say, no, I mean, we should execute this. Um, and make sure you're looking at leading indicators, not revenue is not a great one to look at because by the time you're measuring revenue, typically at the end of the month, is that when you really have solid on revenue? And if it's come down by quite a bit and you haven't adjusted already, that's bad. That's a bad sign. So look at something higher on the funnel to get you a better understanding of that. All right. So that's my presentation for today. That's the thing we go through. Once again, the resilience protocol. You can go to that QR code or the website there, and uh, certainly that's where you'll find the recording of this event, this deck, and there's also a paper there that you can distribute, as you like. You can download the paper from there, and hopefully it puts you in a better shot to go through this. And it goes without saying, we actually do these sessions for our clients. So if you'd like to have someone help facilitate this for you, that's what we do. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'm Jim.Haviland at impactarchitects.io, or you can just, which should have been in the invitation for today as well. And if there's nothing else in chat,